John Edward Jones' body never left this cave. He is still there, upside down, sealed in concrete 150 feet underground. For 28 hours, he felt his lungs fill with fluid while over 100 men tried to pull him out, knowing it would break his legs. There was no happy ending. There was no miracle. This is the real anatomy of the most claustrophobic and slow death in modern history. To understand how a healthy, young man full of life ended up becoming a permanent part of Utah's geology, we need to go back to a cold November night in 2009. John Edward Jones was not a reckless amateur who did not know what he was doing. He was 26 years old, a medical student, and a loving father who had come home for the Thanksgiving holiday. He had explored caves before. He knew the darkness, he knew the cold, and he knew the feeling of being squeezed. But Nutty Putty Cave was different. It was a geological trap disguised as weekend fun. Located west of Utah Lake, this cave was not majestic or wide. It was famous for being narrow, slimy, and hot. A network of tight tunnels that seemed to have been designed by a sadistic architect to test the limits of human flexibility. John was with his brother, Josh, and a group of friends and family. The mood was festive, adventurous. They wanted to relive the old days of childhood when they explored holes in the ground without fear of death. Confidence is a dangerous drug, my friends. John, at 6 feet tall and 200 pounds, was no longer the skinny kid from years ago. He was a big man with broad shoulders and a dense chest, but in his head, he still fit anywhere. The group decided to look for a famous passage inside the cave called the birth canal. To name me alone sends a shiver down the spine. It is a stretch where you have to squeeze yourself so much it feels like you are being born again. But in the underground dark, where the only light comes from the headlamp on your forehead, all crevices look the same. And it was here that fate played its final trick. John separated from the main group and found what he believed to be the birth canal. He looked at the hole, an opening 18 inches wide by 10 inches high. Think about that. Grab a school ruler, 10 inches. It is less than the height of your computer screen. He had to pass his entire body through there. And he went. He went in headfirst. Literally. He crawled forward, using his hips and fingers to propel himself, hoping the tunnel would open up on the other side, as the map said. But the tunnel did not open up. The tunnel got tighter and worse. The tunnel began to slope drastically downward. John was not in the birth canal. He had entered an unmapped area known to local explorers as Ed's Push. The problem with Ed's Push is that it is not a passage. It is a vertical dead end. But John did not know that. He kept pushing. Gravity, that invisible force that keeps us on the ground, became his mortal enemy. Because he was angled downward, the weight of his own body pushed him deeper and deeper into the crevice. There came a point where he realized he could not go back. His shoulders were scraping the walls. He made a decision that would seal his fate. He saw a small crevice ahead and thought it was a turnaround point. He exhaled all the air from his lungs, shrinking his chest to fit into that tiny space, and threw himself forward. This technique is common in caving. You empty your lung, pass through the squeeze, and then breathe on the other side. But when John tried to inhale again, his ribs hit solid rock. He could not expand his chest to fill his lungs completely. He was stuck, and not just stuck. He was stuck upside down, at a 70-degree angle, in a hole where he could not move his arms, could not bend his knees, and could not turn his head. He was corked like a stopper in a wine bottle, but the bottle was made of tons of sedimentary rock that did not care about human life. Panic is an immediate biological reaction. When you are trapped, your reptilian brain screams, run, fight, escape. The heart races, and when the heart races, it needs more oxygen. John started breathing faster, but he had no room to breathe. Every short, desperate breath made his chest scrape against the abrasive walls. He tried to push himself up, but gravity and friction were relentless. His arms were pinned beneath his body. Useless. He was completely immobilized. The silence of the cave was broken only by his wheezing breath and the muffled sounds of his brother Josh, who was right behind him but could not see where John had gotten himself. Josh called out for John. The response came muffled, coming from below, loaded with a fear no brother should hear in another's voice. I'm stuck. I'm really stuck. Josh tried to reach John's legs. He managed to grab his brother's calves and pulled. He pulled with the strength of desperation. For a moment, John moved a few inches up, but as soon as Josh had to let go to catch his breath, gravity pulled John back into the hole, even deeper and with more violence than before. The impact of the body falling back into the crevice made the wedge absolute. Now, not even with outside help, could he move. It was in that moment that the reality of the situation hit. This was not a minor setback. They were dozens of feet below the surface, in a hole where cell phone signal does not exist, where time passes differently. John was inverted. The blood from his legs and torso began to rush to his head. The pressure on his eyes, brain, and lungs began to increase. The human body was not designed to stay upside down for long. The heart has to work double time to pump blood against gravity to the legs, and at the same time, blood pools in vital organs, slowly drowning them. The death clock had started ticking. Josh, realizing he could not get his brother out alone, and that every attempt only made the situation worse, made the difficult decision to leave him there, alone in the dark, to get help. Imagine John's loneliness at that moment. The lights moving away, the sound of his brother's footsteps fading, and the heavy silence of the earth returning to rain. He was alone with his thoughts, with the pain in his crushed shoulders, and with the terrible awareness that he had made a fatal mistake. He thought of his wife, Emily. He thought of his 1-year-old daughter. He thought of the son who was on the way, for Emily was pregnant. The darkness of a cave is not like the darkness of a room. It is an absolute, palpable darkness, and the silence is deafening. John began to pray. What else could he do? He was in an embrace of stone that was slowly squeezing the life out of him. The temperature in the cave was high, about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and the humidity was almost 100%. He began to sweat profusely, but the sweat did not evaporate. He was cooking in his own fluids, upside down. The dust from the cave entered his nose with every forced breath. Meanwhile, on the surface, the alarm was sounded. We have a man stuck in Nutty Putty. The phrase chilled the blood of local rescuers. They knew the cave. They knew rescues. They were difficult, but they had no idea where John was. When the first volunteers arrived, hours later, and saw John's position, optimism vanished from their faces. They did not see John's face. They saw only the soles of his running shoes sticking out of a dark hole. The rest of him had been swallowed by the earth. The logistical challenge was impossible. How do you pull 200 pounds out of a twisting hole without breaking the person's body in the process? How do you pass ropes and pulleys in a place where a hand barely fits? The rescue team, composed of brave men and women, was about to enter a 20-hour physical and psychological battle. A battle against rock, against physics, and against time. And John, down there, was starting to lose feeling in his legs. Blood was pooling in his lungs, starting a process called pulmonary edema. He was drowning in his own internal fluids, drop by drop. The first rescue team reached him. Susie Motola was the first to speak to him. She saw his shoes. Hi, John. My name is Susie. We're going to get you out of there. John replied, his voice failing and full of pain. Hi, Susie. Thanks for coming. But I really, really want to get out. That simple phrase breaks the heart. He still had hope. He thought it would be hard, but that he would get out. He did not know that his body position was creating a natural hook. His hips were wider than the opening. Pulling would be like trying to rip a fish hook out of a fish by pulling the line. You destroy everything in the way. Subscribe to the channel now if you want to see how this rescue operation turned into an underground war zone. In the next chapter, we will detail the arrival of heavy machinery, the plan to break John's legs to get him out, and the moment hope turned into tragedy. John Edward Jones' agony is just beginning, and you will feel every second of it. 12 hours. John had already been upside down for 12 hours when the heavy rescue artillery arrived. Beat this point, the human body begins to shut down. The blood pooled in John's head was causing swelling in his brain and eyes. He was starting to hallucinate. The rescue team, led by veteran cavers, set up a complex system of ropes and pulleys, anchored to the cave's rotting rock walls. The plan was brutally simple. Use mechanical advantage to rip John out of the hole by force. They knew a truth they did not tell the family at that moment. To get John out, They would probably have to break his legs. The angle of the crevice trapped his knees and hips in such a way that pulling meant snapping bones and ligaments. But bones knit. Death does not. They passed a rope around John's legs. Every time they pulled, John screamed. Imagine a scream coming from the depths of the earth, amplified by the echo of the stones. Pull! It hurts, but pull, he yelled. He wanted to live. He wanted to see his unborn son. The team worked in frantic shifts. The heat was unbearable. Strongmen came out of the tunnel vomiting from exhaustion and claustrophobia. But the pulley system started to work, inch by inch. John was being hoisted. For the first time in almost 20 hours, he managed to breathe a little better. The momentary relief caused hope to ignite the tunnel. They managed to lift him enough to see his face, covered in mud and blood, but smiling. He asked for water. He thanked the men. It seemed the nightmare was ending. But Nutty Putty Cave is a cruel villain. The rock in that cave is not solid granite. It is soft limestone, covered by a layer of slimy clay. The anchors holding all of John S.'s weight and the tension of the ropes were set in this treacherous rock. The moment the team stopped to rest and prepare for the final pull, physics collected its price. The sound was like a cannon shot inside a closed closet. One of the main pulleys blew out the rock. The metal anchor flew toward a rescuer's face, knocking him out instantly and nearly cutting his tongue in half. But the worst was not the rescuer's injury. The worst was the sound of John. Without the tension of the rope to hold him, gravity pulled him back into the hole. He did not just slip, he fell with violence, wedging himself even deeper than he was before. The impact expelled the air from his lungs with a guttural moan. The silence that followed the fall was the heaviest thing those people had ever felt. John, who minutes earlier was smiling and drinking water, was now back in the abyss. But this time his body was broken and his morale destroyed. He did not scream anymore. He just whispered, "I'm going to die here, aren't I?" 24 hours. A whole day upside down. Medicine calls this inverse suspension syndrome. John's heart could no longer take pumping blood upward, against gravity, to reach his feet, and the blood that flowed down to vital organs was stagnant, becoming toxic. His kidneys failed. His lungs were so full of fluid that every breath was a gurgling sound, like someone trying to breathe underwater. The rescue team was desolate. The anchor failed, the rescuer was injured, and John's position was now impossible. They had nowhere to set new ropes. The rock was too rotten. The only option would be to break the rock around him. But using jackhammers there would cause vibrations that could make the cave collapse or make John slip even further. They were in a lethal stalemate. Ryan Sertz, one of the rescuers, stayed by John's side in the final hours. He tried to keep John awake. "Stay with me, John. Stay with me." But John's voice became increasingly slurred, disconnected. He started talking to people who were not there. The brain, swollen and deprived of fresh oxygen, was shutting down. In a moment of final lucidity, he asked to send a message to his wife. He said he loved her. He told her to take care of the baby. Shortly before midnight, on November 25th, John's noisy breathing stopped. There was no dramatic, cinematic farewell moment. There was just the ceasing of the fight. The chest stopped trying to expand against the rock. A paramedic doctor crawled as far as he could, placed his hand on John's foot. Only accessible part hand felt no pulse. He called over the radio. His voice choked up. Code red. "John is gone." The news went up, the tunnel like poison. On the surface, John's family, praying, kneeling on the cold ground, saw the officers' expressions change. The cry of John's wife, Emily, echoed through the valley. The man who entered the earth to have fun was now part of it. But the horror still had a final chapter. The body, after death, was confirmed. A practical and macabre question arose: how to get the body out of there. The team tried again, now without the worry of hurting him. But the human body, after death, becomes dead. Rigid weight. John was fused to the crevice. Continuing to try to pull him would put the lives of other rescuers at risk. The cave had already killed one. It was hungry for more. The Jones family and the authorities made an unprecedented decision in the history of the state of Utah. They decided that John would not be disturbed. Nutty Putty Cave would no longer be a recreational site. it would be a cemetery. A week after the death, construction crews arrived, not to excavate, but to seal. They placed explosives on the ceiling of the passage, near where John was, collapsing the entrance to the Ed's Push tunnel. John was buried by the mountain itself. Next, cement trucks pumped tons of concrete into the main opening of the cave. The hole that attracted thousands of adventurers was erased from the map, sealed forever with a metal and stone plaque. Today, if you go there, you will see only a memorial plaque on the desert floor. Beneath your feet, 150 feet deep, John Edward Jones is still upside down, preserved in eternal darkness. He's in exactly the same position where he took his last breath. The closing of Nutty Putty saved lives. Never again will a reckless youth or an adventurous father die in that limestone trap. But the price was too high. John's story serves as a brutal warning about our fragility. We think we are conquerors of nature, but it only takes a wrong turn, a slightly tighter hole, and the earth reminds us that we are just flesh and bone. If you felt tightness in your chest watching this story, if you felt the shortness of breath John felt, then you understand the respect we must have for the unknown. Do not play with the earth. Sometimes it bites, and when it bites, it does not let go. Subscribe to the channel now. We explore reality's worst nightmares, because knowing the truth is the only way to survive it. Leave your like for John S. memory and comment below. Would you have the courage to enter this cave before knowing this story? I see you in the next disaster file.